Hello YouTube, back for the Uvalde series. I'm just going to run through a CU review of the uh, United States 18-meter nationals from 2023. I've already done 2021 in Nephi and 2022 in Bermuda High. So this is the most recent 18-meter nationals in Uvalde, which is the home of the 2024 FAI Gliding World Championships for 18-meter open class and 20 meter. So 20 meter is a two-place sailplane, and there's just one glider per country. 18 meter would have two, and I believe open class would also have two. So that's exciting. This was considered sort of a pre-world championship, but also the United States Nationals for those three classes. Unfortunately, the open class did not get enough gliders to qualify as an official class, so that wasn't a nationals. It was just a small contest with 4 or 5 gliders, or even maybe only 3. I can't remember the number. But anyway, let's get in. Take you back here to the task, and you could see Mexico here, Corpus Christi here. I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can get a lay of the land of where we are in Uvalde in southern Texas. So there's Corpus Christi, there's Del Rio. This is the, I believe it's the Rio Grande, the river that separates Mexico from Texas, and this is San Antonio here. So today's task was a racing task, which I was very pleased with. Finally, a racing task to start a contest instead of the typical 3 or 4 area tasks, no matter what the weather is. But we'll get into that in too much detail. What I do want to talk about, though, just briefly, is how important it is and how difficult it is to change the rules every year. The United States is changing back and forth between FAI rules and U.S. rules and a hybrid of U.S. rules. And today's contest dinged somebody pretty bad, a good friend of mine, Jerzy Simlinski from Canada. And, you think of a guy like that who's been stuck in quarantine in Canada for a couple years, and finally gets out to come and do a contest, and the rule is different than he expects. You can see here this year there was a max start altitude of 6,500. I believe the previous 2 years ago there wasn't a max start height, but there was a check down. I can't remember what we did in Bermuda High for 2022, but in the United States right now the rules change constantly. And it's really annoying because most sports, the rules don't change at all for a very long period of time, any sport. But in soaring here in the United States, we have this group of people who really want to change the rules and essentially create a very different sport with different tasks, different task guidelines, different starting procedures. Every little detail is contested, and they've actually created their own rules. And the majority of United States contests that we fly throughout the year, called regionals, are under that rule set, U.S. rules, which are entirely different than the international rules, which are the IGC rules, or the International Gliding, whatever. It's called IGC, and it's under FAI, and they have a set rule system that is governed by all countries around the world. They vote on it and they solidify the rules. Very slow to change and very consistent, just like any other sport. I mean, tennis doesn't change the size of the court or allow singles to play in the doubles lanes. It's stable. And pretty much every sport is like that. But in the United States, the pilots are forced to sift through this constant change in rules. And essentially that caught Jerzy out today, and I think his mistake was either too high or too fast, but he took a huge penalty, 107 point penalty, which is roughly 10% of the total winner score, even more today because it was a little undercalled and not quite 3 hours for the winner. So that put him, instead of being in first place, back in 16th place, and a good 100 plus points behind the leader, and he never quite recovered from that. And this is just another example of how difficult it is and how strenuous it is on everyone to constantly change the rules. It has an underlying effect on the enjoyment and the quality of the racing. And I want the U.S. Governing body to finally sort of give up and just focus on A, the FAI rules, and B, and not a hybrid of U.S. rules and FAI rules, but simply the FAI rules. And also with a thought that rules should not be ground around and changed and opinion polled every single year. That's too much. We need to focus on other things like having fun and flying the gliders and not be on this endless saga of trying to change the rules. Maybe the rules should only be changed once every 3 or to 5 years. Maybe they should be steady for a longer period of time. And this kind of thing, it's very difficult for pilots because for the first couple days of the contest, there's often little mistakes made because each year the system changes considerably. So anyway, that was my comment there, and I feel that the sport of soaring needs to, especially here in the United States, needs to stop with this constant grind. Okay, so this day was pretty exciting. I actually have some photography of the last turn point. All right, here we go. So we're back. These were the clouds going into the so the task goes from Uvalde to McKinley to Farias down to El Caballero, and this picture is coming into this turn point. And right about here, this is Yankee Oscar, and I'm in this group here. There's a thunderstorm here with a lot of shade here, and this is that shade, and this is the clouds kind of on this track coming back here to the north. So I'm on this leg right now. We're looking out the left wing, and then I'm going to turn left and basically aim towards the camera and the camera's direction, or a little bit left to go back towards home. And you can see a lot of guys deviated to the right of the rum line. This is the rum line here to the finish to get around some of these heavier buildups, and more importantly out into the sun, which you can see on the ground here. So these photos, this set of photos, sorry, that's a little out of focus. Now that's facing back to the east, also out of focus. You can see we're running down between a lot of shade and high-level clouds on the right and those clouds on the left that you just saw. This, I think, is just getting into the turn. And there's a look back to the left. That's a look to the right, still on this leg to the east. So that's what the clouds looked that day. There was big buildups, big cumulonimbus, towering Q, lots of shade, lots of schmutz, as I like to call it. Sean Frankie's father, Manfred, used to call clouds like this schmutz, so now basically I call all clouds that don't look good schmutz. Sorry. But that's what the day looked like throughout most of the task area. It was quite overdeveloped, quite powerful where there was sun on the ground, but it could weaken up quite quickly if there were large areas of shade that you had to run under. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of guidance as to what the day looked like. So let's go back to Rich Owen's report. Rich Owen is a contest pilot out of Florida. He's an ex-Navy guy, ex-Delta pilot, and he goes to a lot of contests, and he does almost all the contest reporting, which there's a lot of thought that goes into this. He has to talk to the different pilots and sit down and write this. He's a very good writer, and thank you, Rich, for taking the time to do so many contest reports for the contest pilots. And it basically keeps a record that we can fall back on and describe. Even though we're a tiny, small sport, it's very nice to have a record of this. So thank you, Rich. So we had to wait for the open class to start. He mentions here, right off toe, there was good climbs. I think there was a couple guys who struggled a little bit, but ultimately we got up to 8,500. And unfortunately, and I think that's a good word, this year the class's max start altitude was 6,500, and everyone had to come down to the altitude to start. And what that does, I'm saying this for the contest pilots, fellow contest pilots who maybe vote between FAI rules and U.S. rules every year in our country's opinion poll, is when the gliders are at 8,500 and when they descend, you might as well shoot a flare in the air to say, hey guys, I'm about to start. And it makes it really easy for leechers to identify that. And it also makes it very hard for someone to make that decision to come down, because usually there's a lot of guys keeping an eye on that group, and you know you're going to be followed by 6 or 7 good pilots who are suddenly going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes on you because they watch you start, watch you leave, wait for a better climb, start a little higher, chase you down, and they gain some relative points. And everybody's looking for an objective risk model in soaring, and that is a nature of the way the sport is played. And there's no way to get around that unless you made the gliders invisible. So you can't do that. FLARM, the range is only slightly farther than people's visual ability, and that range difference, I think, is really questionable because 5 miles away is a long time before you get there, and what kind of bubble do you have there after making that deviation? So, it's nice to have a maximum starting altitude that is unlimited, or just limited by the clouds, let's say, so that you are, and the clouds is a rule. You're not allowed to fly in the clouds. You can just start when you want. You go up to maximum altitude and you can go. There's no obvious, okay, this guy's suddenly descending 2,000, 3,000 feet, which nobody's going to do unless they're seriously going to start. And it's quite a risk to climb back up and use that as a fake. You may not get a climb. Everybody may go while you're trying to climb back up. And, it's a whole series of issues there. So everyone came down to that altitude. Most competitors delayed their start to let the queue fill out on track. I remember that very well. It was a very late developing day. I think we launched around 1 o'clock, so we're getting ready to start around 2 o'clock. Actually, we can check that out over here. So, yeah, most of the starts were, looks like, between 4:05, or Dave Leonard was an early starter, and a late starter would be maybe 25. So everybody basically started within 20 minutes. All right, sorry. Back to the article. So, decision making on the where to turn was easy. This was a racing task. Again, I was very excited to have a racing task and not have to deal with the chance that basically is associated with broad, wide turn areas. And on a day like today, with the big overdevelopment and rain and some thunderstorms, that would have made a big difference. But everyone is able to finish the task just fine. Racing tasks are rarely cut off by thunderstorms, as much as people complain. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I think I've only seen, I've seen contest tasks where some people are hurt by thunderstorms, but everyone, the majority of the contest pilots, finished those tasks. I've yet to see a thunderstorm sitting directly over a turn point, and that would be an issue for sure, but that's why the area task is there on those days where there's definitely going to be thunderstorms. On this day, it was widely scattered thunderstorms and some overdevelopment, and the racing task was appropriate. All right, so the second leg was straight on course, but this, he says it was simple and easy, but for me it really wasn't. This was where I gained a lot. I got chased down by a pack that started behind me, but I was able to break away on the second leg with some really long glides and maybe thermal selection and routing. And I'll show you that on the second leg. The third leg, decisions to favor more of a southern route from the direct course. And you can see that here a little bit to the south with some guys working hard. This is where the storms were, so there's guys working around those, but a little bit on the south side of that. And yeah, I would agree with that. There were small showers around 25 miles from the turn point that the competitors had to deal with. And yeah, they were showers. They really weren't thunderstorms. I don't think there was lightning. There might have been a couple sparks out of one of them, if I remember correctly, but it was, you could go around them. They weren't 30 miles wide. They were 5 miles wide. No big deal. Later starting pilots had a more difficult time with this leg as spread out and shade and rain continued to degrade the conditions in this area. So early starting definitely made sense, but it was only slightly better. From my perspective, I finished fourth for the day, or third for the day, but third when Jersey got his penalty. So, final glides were pretty stress-free. It was a fast final leg. Most started the glide from about 80 miles out, and I think this is true. I'll have to look at my data. I looked at several traces, and many gliders took significantly different paths to the finish. This is true. It was spreading out there, so there were still cues, but there were not lines of cues. They were just random, and the best clouds were not on course, at least for my time through there. I'm not sure about the guys behind. I could speak for the guys ahead. So there's some deviation to the strongest clouds was in order there. And the scores were very tight. He says this race is going to be something to watch. I agree. It was a great contest, very close. Rick and Jabot finished third, Gary Ittner second, and Gary had just won the sports class in Texas just a few days before this, near Houston, Texas. And Jerzy Simplinski from Canada, who we just discussed, who got nipped for that penalty, and that penalty wasn't added to the scores at the time of the writing of Rich's article here. He won the day, basically. But with that penalty, he fell to 16th, and Gary Ittner won the day. So, okay, let's jump over to the task. I have the top 10, including Jersey, because I think it's worthwhile to see Jersey's performance here. I'm not positive what the penalty was, and we could take a look. It's either too fast or too high. 6,500 was the limit, and I'm guessing he got caught on the limit, but I believe there's also a speed limit. I can't remember, but again, every year the rules are slightly different, and it's not like golf or tennis or any other sport that you play normally in your life. In soaring, the rules change significantly every single year, and it's a fight between some U.S. guys who didn't like the international rules 20 years ago and started their own campaign, and there's a big shit fight now between pilots in the United States who want to go back to the basic rules like the rest of the world, or the guys who want to change it because of various reasons. They think it's unsafe, and I don't know, they just need something else to do. But that's what happened there for Jersey. But I think it's important to have him, his tactics and strategy included in this review. All right, so here you can see the task. Once again, Uvalde to McKinley, McKinley to Farias, down to El Caballero, and then back up to Uvalde. This is a 3D view. We'll swing that around and try and make it, as much sense of the sort of the close-in tactics. And then over here, I'll keep it out zoomed a little bit so you can see where everybody's going generally. This is a fun thing. This is the barograph, and you can sort of see, you can see here pods of gliders launching, and then a delay as the airplanes are up, and then another pod goes. You can see a lot of data here throughout the day, and it's gray until the gliders actually start the task. And once the gliders start the task, this will turn to its associated color. And actually, I'm going to put the legend up here so you can sort of see the colors and who is associated to what. Some of the other gliders here, and then I could always, as needed, pull up and we could look at the rest of the data. All right, so let's jump into it, and I will try and describe this. I had an interesting conversation with I think I was the first to launch on the first day, which I hated. When you come to a contest, they sort of randomly pick the starting order, and you have to bring your gliders out to the grid and basically put them on the runway in an order that's been pre-selected for you. And I like to go in the middle, maybe towards the back. But obviously, if the conditions are deteriorating, the first guys are able to get up higher, and then you get up and there's no lift remaining, that can be a little bit of a risk. When you go first, they're generally launching you at the first sign of lift, and it's often really hard to get up. And you can see here, still only at 4,000 feet and struggling to climb. Nobody's much above 4,000 feet, and that's only 3,000 feet above the ground. So it's a little stressful, and I'll zoom in here so you can sort of see what's happening. And now that you can see the whole task, this is basically all homogeneous flat land, desert, a little bit of irrigated ranch land, but you guys know what southern Texas looks like. It's pretty barren. This is the finish circle, and this is the starting line, which is perpendicular to the center of the first turn. And Rich mentioned that we got up to 8,500 before the start, and had to come down to 6,500. And we're going to watch Jersey to see what altitude he started at, to see sort of how he got his penalty. 2 hotels coming over to my thermal. Didn't find it. And you can also see a vertical component to this view, which I really like. Maybe how high someone is above someone. So just another thing that I've done in some of the other videos. These gliders are, like, the distance between them is dramatically increased. So these gliders are way bigger than they should be, and therefore they're way closer together. The scale is wrong, but it just makes it easier to view. But just keep in mind that these two guys look like they're a wingspan apart, when in reality they're probably a few hundred meters apart. And this distance here from tip to tip, just so you know, is 5 kilometers from the center to the edge, or 10 kilometers across. So for scale, we know that that is 10 kilometers, and then this is a scale here. That is also 10 kilometers with 1, 2, 3, and on across to 10, to give you a sense of scale here. And the gliders are not as close together as they look, which I think frightened a few people watching the Nephi stuff. So I'll zoom out here a little bit, and we'll speed it up a little bit until we get some starters. Pre-start, everyone is sampling the sky. In this case, there were wispy Q developing. Some people are trying to get on course a little bit. Here's X-Ray Golf, about 10 kilometers up on course. Fernando Silva, Foxtrot Sierra. They're trying to get a feel for what are they going to expect on course, but everything is very dynamic. The conditions are increasing. Looking down the first leg here, so that's the first leg. The Q were Spartan here. So one of the reasons that everybody's waiting is they're waiting until the clouds develop, because clouds are clouds with hard, flat bottoms are indicators of strong lift, and you don't have to search for climbs as much. In blue conditions, which have no clouds at all, the gliders have no indication in the air at all of where the climbs are. So when there's clouds, it's a lot easier to race and to fly. Looks like we got a couple starters here, and I'm going to zoom in here to try and catch Jersey's start. But the first starter is Fox 1. Looks like that's Dave Springford from the Toronto, Canada area. A very good pilot, a Canadian team pilot. And Foxtrot Hotel is the AS-33 Thomas Greenhill's, I believe that's Thomas Greenhill's glider, which is an AS-33, and I think this must be his like an old LX Nano or something, so it's still saying LS10, but that, I believe that's the I might be wrong, but that might be the new AS-33 glider from Schleicher in Germany, which is everybody's keeping their eye on. Okay. Oh, this is the airspace. So airspace is depicted there by those blue pieces. I think, yeah, you can see Del Rio down here. But that's an airspace depiction. Okay, so we have our first starters. We can see them here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit more. And you're going to see a little bit of, yeah, I'm going to go back just a just a tiny bit. So let me slow it down just a bit. You can see the gaggle has already sort of assembled. I've got a couple people with me here, and I am up at 7,900 feet, and I think Jersey is getting ready to start. He's lower, so he's at 7,200. So let's keep an eye on this and find out what Jersey's starting penalty is. It looks like Jersey's going for the start there, right there. I'll zoom in a little bit more. And tink, there's Jersey's start. So it looks like he thought it was 7,000 maybe, and it looks like he's starting at, let's go right over to him. Looks like he's starting at 6,900. So if we play it forward a few more clicks, yep, he turns. So that's a 400-foot starting error. And his speed doesn't look too extreme. It's only 163 kph, about 100 miles an hour. But that was where he got his penalty. And so 400 feet, that's worth maybe a mile or two of forward distance, maybe a couple miles per hour of speed, or a couple K of speed, so about 1 mile per hour of speed. It's not very much. But that's very unfortunate for Jersey to have that penalty. It is in the rules. I'm not saying the rules are wrong. I'm just saying it's hard when the rules change every year, because people are human. They get up there, they get busy on a lot of things, and they tend to fall back onto what they're used to. And because it changes so much, I don't think any of us are really used to anything. It's just kind of requires a lot of concentration and memory not to make that mistake. Okay. So let's speed it up a little bit. Time of day, I think there was some early shut-off happening today. It's about, looks like it is 2:10. I think I'm going to start here relatively quickly, but I did have a pretty large group following around behind me, and here's my effort to try and shake them. I went way back behind. Everybody came with me. There probably was a cloud there, but you can see that I'm generally trying to escape. I'm trying to go in ways that don't make sense, but they're still following me. So I want to start, but I don't want to tow everybody. And I'm doing my best to kind of evade the group here. I'm still up at 7,300. I need to come down to 6,500. And I think there I'm probably going for a start. But you can see how these guys are just following. Guys, I don't think there are any gals this year, but it's always a challenge. So there's my start, right at 6,500 it looked like. And those guys also start, but take a little bit different line. And we're off to the races. So I'm going to pull out on the 2D just a little bit. There's X-ray golf. And come down a little bit so we can see a little bit of the vertical perspective. 2 whiskey and 2 tango going right down the rum line. And I'm catching up to Mike Sierra a little bit. I lost quite a bit here in the beginning. It was just poor cloud selection. I was going for thinner, newer clouds that were out in the open, but there was more density of clouds along the rum line and to the right, but there was also some shade. So oddly enough, these guys are way to the right of rum line here. This is the rum line, so everybody's going around to the south, but some guys are going 30 degrees offline to the south. Let me zoom this out a little bit on this side so we can see. Yeah, this is our first turn here. You can see the spread, even though there's only 20 minutes of spread from the first starters to the tail end starters. This is a relatively short leg. Let's see. If I go to the task, window, tasks, I think I can break down the distance. Yeah, so the first leg is only 66K. So a very, very quick leg. All right. So for the beginners, the first leg for me is very much about not taking risk, but it's also the most stressful leg because it's impossible to be perfect. It's rare that you select the perfect cloud each time and get the strongest climb and just blast away. There's a lot of good pilots around you. You're going to second guess yourself, and it's going to put stress on you to think maybe I'm doing something wrong here. And if you start and immediately lose, let's say, 3 or 4 minutes on some of the guys who start behind you and they catch up, that puts you in a mental state of taking more risk, which is the worst thing that you can do. You have to trust your ability and how your ability is going to stretch out all the practice that you've done at home, cloud selection, routing, speed to fly, everything blends in. Even if the group is following right behind you, as you get better, you will slowly break it open. And there's some rare cases that you might not, and that could be frustrating, but it's certainly not something to focus on. So, on this leg, sometimes you have to break the streak of feeling pressure and take a weak climb. And I think that's what I'm doing right here. I knew things weren't going as well as they could have. I knew I was probably losing on some of the folks behind, but I needed to get back up into a lower risk situation. So, 2.3 meters a second is about 4 to 5 knots. It's a reasonable climb for Uvalde at 2 o'clock, maybe a little subpar, but it's better to be up at, let's say, 6,000 or 7,000 feet than it is to be down at 4,000 or 5,000 feet, especially with all these wolves, chasing you. You can see that I have, other than Mike Sierra, Sergei Morozov from Canada, I have a huge hole to the next group in front of me. This is 20K here, this amount. So it's 20K up to this group, Yo, X-Ray Golf, maybe 4 or 5K to Mike Sierra, and then a big pack here, which I'm leading, and they will rip you apart if you just let them do that. If you go ahead low, get low and don't find a strong climb, they'll work together as a team. You can see there's a pack of 2 here, a pack of 3 here, a pack of 2 or 3 here. They're kind of working together, and more than 50% of them are probably going to beat you from behind, especially when they're spread out like this. So the best thing you can do is slow down, get up, and live to fight another day. And maybe that's too advanced for beginners to think about, but it's better to have options than it is to box yourself in a corner. So if you're expecting 7-knot climbs to win the day on the first leg and you can't find it and you start to get lower than you'd like, you're starting to feel the edge, it's better to take a climb, reset, and try again than it is to continue to push off low, off in front of the gaggle. Maybe that is not beginner. It's probably good for beginners and advanced pilots. Trying to think of the range of people who might be watching this. 9-1 there, looks like he had a good leg. I like to go back and see when people started. 9-1, Glenn Kelly, he started at 18, and so he started right with me, 18:28. I started at 18:07, so he started slightly behind me. Sorry, I have to pause a little bit. I've got a phone call. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, I'm about even with 9-1. He started a little bit behind. He's a little higher, so he just found a better climb than I am. TT, Tim Taylor. Where did Tim start? At 19, so he started a minute behind me, almost exactly, 50 seconds behind me, but he's a little bit below. So I'm not doing terrible here, but it is a very, I don't want to say stressful time, but it is a very powerful time in a glider race, the start, and you need to for me at least, you need to block out what's happening with everybody around you and who's who. I mean, sometimes you want to keep track of certain people, but you have to stick to your plan of your risk model, and unless there's something obvious ahead that you can push for. And you're very high odds of that working out. In general, you want to stay in your lift band. What you can see here is generally 5 to 8. Maybe it's 45 to 8, but it looks like the majority of the people are generally staying higher. And this one guy here is clearly going down to 2,000 feet, is falling out of the lift band pretty strongly in the next 10 minutes. So we'll have to see who that is. It's light green or light medium green, so somewhere in here. Okay. First guys are already around the turn. LD, I always like to watch LDs in the run. 89, 88, 73. So where's 91? 91's not in the top 10. Is Hotel 7? No, not today, but it's always interesting to watch, especially with the guys around you. But right now, I don't have those guys. Looks like 91 is flying really well. Let's see what he's finding. No, just a basic 49. Okay. Let's put it over here where the following group is, because it's such a big distance to the rear group, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more here. So I remember this vividly because this is only a couple months ago, and this is a 3.4 meter per second climb. So that's a nice climb, but unfortunately, look at those guys just snap right in there on me. There was a strong line of clouds around to the south here, and then a big gap out to this turn point. So everybody's going around to the left and shooting in and then coming back. And I think there was a big cloud here that I tanked up on and then came back to. And so this is a little bit scary here at this turn point, because you have this is a pretty shallow angle, and you have people coming in and coming out almost on the same line. So the sort of safety radar goes on. It's great that we have FLARM. FLARM helps. I believe all the gliders here were required to have FLARM, but there was maybe a little something to think about here as our group came in and out of this turn point. So that's a good, strong climb going on right now. And every single guy behind me jumped into it. And if I remember correctly, this is going to be pretty high LD. We're basically running under lift here. And the guy who really performed well in this, and I remember in the aftermath, was, I think, 9 Bravo and 2 Tango, the JS3s. Foxtrot Sierra is also a JS3. And 1X is also a JS3. So anytime you're running under lift, there must be some element in the performance of the small wing glider that it really does seem to gain quite a bit. So there we're now jumping. I was jumping out, so I ran under the lift. These guys cut it off. 9 Bravo and 2 Hotel did the same thing. And you could see there's a lot of head-to-head happening here, depending on how people come in and out of the turn point. Tango is coming right up against the grain. So you want to be really careful of this, going in, going out before you turn, looking above, clearing below, just making sure that somebody isn't sneaking into a blind spot for you, and making sure that everybody stays safe. Number one, this is a sport, and it's a amateur sport, and it's meant to be fun. Big climb there, 3.7 meters per second. So I hope this doesn't over jump, but yeah, that's a nice tank up there. 3.7. starting at 68, and I should come out of the top at 78. And yeah, so yep, 79. And this was big, so I took that climb. So did the rest of them. God, it's amazing. But that got me up and running and got me a little bit clear, and now we're off to the races under a lot of overdeveloped queue. And you can see a lot of, deviating here right down the run line. But there's some high speeds that happen on the second leg. And, that distance there looks to be about, we'll call it 3K. And 9.1 is still there with me, although I think I'm a little above 9.1 at this point. But I stretch out on that group here, and I basically leave that group behind and come into touch with this group ahead. Mike Sierra is really cranking. He's opened up on me quite a bit, but I end up kind of moving up into this realm and leaving this group behind, which was great for scoring. X-Ray Charlie, Sean Murphy, who finished second, just really close. He actually had a little bit of a bad day today, and I think that might even be more important than the last day. But he ended up getting an 891, so that right there was a 60-70 point chunk of important points. And I'm not sure what happened. He might have just really been trying to start late and to grind up through the group, or couldn't get up at some point, got low. I didn't look, but I did notice that. So I view that just as too much risk. Like, there weren't that many points to gain today. Everybody's going to go pretty much, look at the speeds, 94 on down to 85. And the point range is 965 on down to, for a guy who goes 87, 897. It's not a huge swing of points to take that big of a risk. And starting that late in the day, if something comes up and you get cut off and held out, you're in a different time of the day, and you're in a different set of real estate time, and the chances of something going bad are pretty big. If he would have just stayed with the group on this day, he probably would have won the contest. Of course, we each can say that for every single day, but I think in general, there might be something for him to learn from there. It's better to just stay in the hunt and let your skills kind of pull you slightly ahead. It's just like sailing, and the presentation I did for the U.S. team. The top sailors do not start on the ends of the starting line, which are high risk. So if you start on one end of the starting line or the other end of the starting line, and you get a big wind shift towards your side, so if you're on the left end of the line, a left shift, or a right end of the line, a right shift, you'll win the race. And that's great. But also, if the wind shifts the opposite way, you get a bad score for that race. And it's about holding a high average to win these big competitive events with lots of people, and sailing and soaring is very similar. So, you don't want to stand out too much and be a high risk taker all the time. Maybe that is, hopefully no one takes offense to that. I'm just trying to point out what I'm seeing. All right, so this is a big run here. So let's see, I got a 94 LD here. Sergey Morozov, Mike Sierra gets a 127 LD. Zulu Lima, who's out front. So there's some big LDs out here on this leg. And the guys who don't recognize that and get long, high-speed runs and stop for weak climbs lose a ton of distance. And I just want to scale this out here a little bit. So there's 7 Tango, and there is Fox Sierra. So that is about 2.5 kilometers. And I think Fox Sierra is at the same altitude, just a little bit below, 300 feet below. 9-1 the same. Hotel 7 the same. 9 Bravo, I think, is at a similar altitude. But the way that this leg is played is significant, and there are some big gains made. You can see 9-1 just stopped for a climb. There's a 3.7 for 1240. Fox Sierra and Hotel 7 jump right into it. 3.7 is a big climb. That's getting close to 8 knots. And I'm back up to 8,200 feet. And they're in a mob, same altitude, kind of fighting each other. And I wonder if that slows them down a little bit. So let's see, where is Fox Sierra? Only gets 2.5 meters out of that. So basically half the climb rate. And Hotel 7 the same. And this is the only 2.3. So the challenge, and I learned this from being in contests with Jersey, when you're kind of following someone, you're mentally thinking, okay, the climb is there, and you route yourself into that thermal and pull up and expect to find the same climb. But those climbs move dramatically over time, and as the lift ascends, it's not just a straight column, it's dancing around. And it's important that you feel the thermal yourself, independent of the visual cue from the glider in front of you. And I think I do this a lot. I think others do it a lot. It's also just a function of sometime the glider that got there 2 minutes before you is in the bubble, and now the bubble is gone. And we don't understand the thermodynamics perfectly with what's happening, but it is very difficult to follow a very fast pilot who's feeling the air better. Obviously, 7 Tango found that climb before anybody else got here and felt it up and climbed pretty aggressively there. And the other guys are kind of coming in expecting it, but they're not feeling for it all on their own, and there's a value to that. So a little bit, I'm not saying it's not good to use that indicator ahead of you. It makes sense to do that, but you also have to find the same climb rates, or you're going to get left behind. So the selection is important. So now Foxtrot Sierra and Hotel 7 left that climb, which they should have because it was pretty weak for them. And looks like now the distance it's even less. It's maybe 2K here. This is a 5K scale. But Foxtrot Sierra is at 62 and I'm at 76. So 1,200 feet and I'm further above. So now they're chasing from below and behind. And 1,200 feet is a huge amount. I'm feeling air that is incredibly different from them. I'm running in air that's incredibly different from them. And that really makes a big difference. So here I'm running at 118 LD and I'm going to go 53K. Fox Sierra is running at 39 and he's only going to go 12K until he stops again. So, you start to get into this void where there's really almost no value to following somebody who's that high above you at that point, because often you're in totally different air, and we've all experienced it. This can be a very painful feeling when that happens. You've got to use your own cues, and it's kind of like flying IFR. Don't believe what your body is telling you. You have to feel what the glider is telling you. So don't believe what your eyes are telling you with the glider out ahead of you. You have to feel it with your own body, feel the air with your own body. And often what you do when you're in this trailing position is just kind of follow them, and you see them do a pull-up or you see them gliding really well, and you expect to get the same for yourself, but you're so far below. That's 1,200 feet, just to give you a sense of scale. Anyway, I don't know if that's good for beginners or advanced, but that's what I'm thinking of. My friend the other day said that it's PhD level, which is quite flattering. I don't know if that's something in today's day and age that I would be too proud of, but I enjoy speaking about it, so we'll keep doing the best that we can. So I know these guys are gonna end up taking weaker climbs. That was a miss for Fox Sierra, so he's falling back. Hotel 7 sticking in, catching up to Yankee Oscar a little bit. Mike Sierra is just rocking it right now. So Mike Sierra and I basically finished together, but velocity task up to this point is, I believe this is it. It's 152 for Sergey, and I'm at 141. So I'm not sure. We'll have to wait till we get to the end of the task. Which one of these is actually the velocity task average? It may be this one, VT. But Sergey right now is kicking a 8-9er is kicking a 155 or a 150, and Mike Sierra is kicking a 155 or 152. Jersey, who won the day, is only a 145 or 137 at this point. So at this point in the task, 8-9er and Mike Sierra are killing it. Yeah. And there's a look up the leg. You can see all the deviation here. The clouds got thinner at a certain point, and the thick area of strong cumulus and almost towering cumulus that we were running under broke down a little bit, and it got a little bit more just traditional. There was some wind today out of the south, so 148, so that'd be the southeast. So the wind is out of this direction, so we're just a little bit crosswind or into the wind at this point. And you can see Fox Sierra's taking a very different line. Everybody's starting to break up and pile on their deviation mileage. So you need on a racing task, you need an incredibly stronger climb average to make up for significant deviation. So it's often better to go straight and take normal climbs and just do better thermal selection when you can. I remember flying, and I remember Hotel 7 hanging in there from low and behind and thinking eventually he's going to have to stop. And at some point here, it looks like he does. Yep. All right, so I get a 3 meter per second. Take it for a quick 1,000. I've connected with David Nadler, Yankee Oscar, and we're almost down here to this next turn point. Jersey's just rounding, and I would say at this point, if I zoom out, we should be able to look at distance task. Jersey's at 169, and I am at 152. So Jersey's about 17 kilometers ahead of me. And I'd say that's pretty close to how far ahead he started. Velocity average, he's at 142, and I'm at 143. So I'm actually slightly faster than him at this point in the task. And 2.3. So I'm probably thinking something about the wind. Yeah, on the next leg, the wind is out of the east now at 16K. So I'm trying to get as high as possible before going into the turn point. You always want to go into a downwind turn point as high as possible, because if you think about it, the thermal drift adds to your speed on the downwind side. On the upwind side, the thermal drift subtracts from your speed. So essentially the thermal is worth, based on the wind speed, considerably less on the upwind because you're drifting back and you're not making, that altitude is not giving you as much forward progress towards where you're trying to go next. So I get this from Condor, fly a lot of Condor, where the basic elements of soaring are really critical because there's not as much detail in that simulation as there is in the real world. And you learn how important altitude going into a downwind turn point can be, and really focus on the basics. So if you want to become a cross-country pilot, fly Condor like crazy. It is absolutely the best thing you can do to learn how to be efficient. And really, cross-country and racing, it's just about being efficient. So it's nice to have Dave Nadler with me here, and he's in a Ventus 3, I believe, and we set off onto that leg. And if you remember, this is what we're seeing up ahead of us. Now, obviously, now we're almost at the end of this leg, but there's a lot of towering queue, and there's a lot of shade on the ground and very little sun on the ground in areas. So you have to be very careful of how we strategically sort of set this up. And you can see Dave is he likes to vary his there's a miss for me. He's not afraid to deviate. You can see up ahead the lead group, Papa 7 and X-Ray Golf. That's a difficult thing when you get two guys like Jersey and Papa 7 together. You do not. Good things are not going to happen for everybody else. That is a very fast group, and there's just two of them flying together here and playing off of each other, and it makes sense if you look at the results. They killed us, 94.2 and 94.3. So that's one of the things that you just can't plan for, because I think Gary, let's go back to the scores. Let's see, Gary started at 09.21 and Jersey started at, so Jersey just started just slightly behind him, and he's still sitting there slightly behind them. So they're almost dead even right now. Jersey has the luxury of being able to sit behind him because he has that 40 seconds in the bank, and but they're two of the best minds in terms of efficient cross-country flight in the contest, and those two guys together are going to be brutal. Dave and I think, go pretty darn fast down this leg too, so it's better for thermal selection. You can spread out and find cores more quickly, and then you have, if the person is even with you or can move to the side, you have at least two people sampling two separate components of air. Excuse me. But we're struggling here. I think that's my third miss on this leg into the wind. It's out of the south-southeast here at 10 to 20 kph. And we're probably going through something here. I tend to try and not deviate. And there I finally find 3.6. So 3 misses. But we finally get back up, and it looks like we're going to climb up to maybe 9,000. Yankee Oscar's in a separate core, and that's good. And it looks like now we're maybe going to make a similar deviation to the lead group. Looks like we're bending to the right a little bit. Not as much, but now there I go. And this is that point where I think Yankee Oscar goes a totally different way, but I'm going to wait to show the photos until we find out for sure what happens. No, so it's not yet. We're still a little bit too far away from the turn point. We're kind of catching up to the lead group here. And you could see, for whatever reason, we've really opened up on this group behind. You have 9 Bravo, Fox Sierra, Romeo Fox group here, and the 2 Hotel 7912W group here, and then stragglers behind. But we've kind of crossed the gap if you think of the Tour de France, and there's the peloton and there's the breakaway. we're trying to push up into this group a little bit. And I think it was possible if I could replay this flight, but whoops. Okay. There's never a perfect flight. Just never. Mike Sierra is pretty low out there in front of us, and even though he started only he started right in front of me, I think. Mike Sierra was 16 and I was 18, so he started 2 minutes in front of me, and I've kind of caught him. Finally. It took a long time, and he was 20, 30K ahead for a while. I've gotten away from Dave a little bit, and this is 20K, so maybe 5K ahead of Dave, and a 2.4 meter climb. And now we're starting to get up to that decision point where, okay, so Mike Sierra goes around to the right. Pretty much all of this group goes around to the right. But there's a big rain shower here. There was, I think, a bolt of lightning or two that came out of it, which when you're flying with friends and lightning comes out of a storm and you know he's on the other side of it and you're on one side of it, you start to realize how small you are. And I remember being a little worried that one of us would get it, but there's something here. And I'll just go back and review those photos really quick. So that's towards the end. I think we've passed the thunderstorm now. But you know, it was like that, or maybe even a little bit bigger back here behind us. And then this is what we're seeing in terms of. Let me pull this out here a little bit. That view is kind of looking this way. And you can see that this course right on line is in the shade and under that cloud, but it's all shade from this high outflow from that stuff that we were dealing with at the first turn point in the early part of the second leg. And the way home is to stay out in the sun, which is something like this, which is to go maybe to that cloud or this cloud, touch it and climb up, and then bend around and stay over the sun. Everybody, of the 20 or so gliders in this race, everybody tries quite a few different options there, but most of the guys do the smart thing and stay over the sun. Sun heats, it's very quick, starts sending thermals up, and you're gonna have lift and clouds there at altitude, and areas over the shade are going to be decaying, and that lift is going to be dropping and dying. So sun is our engine, as they say in glider racing. And just to note here, the Yankee Oscar did well for a while, but I'm going to pull him up so we can keep an eye on him. But I think he suffered in altitude. So we left pretty much together at the same altitude, but he's now down below 5, and I'm still at 75. And he's basically coming back through this heavy shade. And he stops and takes a climb. It's a miss. So he's deviated a ton. Pretty much 20K here, more than 20K, and lost altitude, and he's found a weak climb. So that's so in my view, even though he was a creative mind and he likes to, play with it, play with the sky a little bit, so to speak. It is a race. It is a competition. You had a really good pilot right there in front of you, right behind another really good pilot, and you could have worked as a team up through that area. He chose differently and learned another lesson. I suppose it maybe could have pulled off, but I think 98 out of 100 times this was the better routing for what most of the folks did. And you can see the rear group is running up the exact same path. And they're all at the same altitudes. So we're all at basically 75 at a high and 65 at a low. Whoops. All right, so now we'll finish it up. Mike Sierra rounds. We'll kick it this way so we can see everything that's happening. Oh, this is interesting. So Mike Sierra is in a huge climb, 3.4 meters. I end up getting 3.8, and then Yankee Oscar is actually pretty low now, 4,800, 4,400 AGL, and he's looking at us from that way, and at least he can come to our climb maybe, but he's getting pretty low. Mike Sierra takes off, and Yankee Oscar, yeah, finds a good one, 3.4 meters a second. But the deviation that he took to do that was significant, and in general, you can see what he lost. Yeah, he only lost maybe 6, 7, 8K in that, but that would have been the difference between 804 points and maybe 900 points. And he also had a little bit of a starting penalty, so that was a big risk. He had a pretty good task going up until that point. All right, so now the race is on to get to the finish. And it still feels like I'm running about the same pace as X-Ray Golf and Papa 7, about 20K behind, but it's so hard to judge. And here you get some very different opinions about how to go home. So we're sweeping around in the sun that you saw in that photo, but for some reason X-Ray Golf and Papa 7 are digging back into the center of the course or back onto the rim line pretty aggressively, and that's number one. They know it is, if all things are equal, it's better to go in a straight line to the turn, to the next turn, or to the finish in this case, less distance, and obviously it's cloud selection. So, and I think this was shade here, so this is just staying around it, and maybe they're seeing some new clouds pop off over here. Roy, I don't know if I forgot to reset your timing, but you are in it looks like you're going down the second leg. Let me look at that. When did Roy start? Roy starts at 13:47. Huh. Maybe he had to go back and relight or something. A little bit longer time on course, but it seems like he started earlier than we all did. I'm not sure what's going on there. So Sergey and I are flying on home, and I'm leeching Sergey there pretty hard. Trying to get off to the side of him for that climb. 3.4 meters a second for both of us. And he was just a little higher. He leaves first. And now we're sweeping back in. It almost looks like X-Ray Golf really departed from the gang here. Papa 7 started just behind him. X-Ray Golf is up at 3,500, and Papa 7 is at 3,000. So he's a little higher. He's going to be going a little faster. Net, he's only a tenth or something faster Niner is our AS-33, the new AS-33. But this is basically our final glide now, and with the getting to final glide is an advantage because you kind of accordion out. You reach that altitude first and then stretch out ahead. And so when you lose a little bit of a gap, you can lose a lot by being behind. And I remember almost catching Mike Sierra here on this final glide, but it's really kind of a moot point. There you can see our descents into the finish, and the herd behind is still up at altitude. There's the first finishers, so they finished just after 22:05, and then we finish about 7-8 minutes later. Okay, and let's come back to the group behind. You can see, look at that gap. Really, the day must have gotten weaker right about at this point, and there's a pretty big gap back to the rest of the group. And obviously sometimes that works in the opposite. If you start too early, the group grinds you down because you started in too weak of a condition, and they get higher and go faster at the beginning and catch up. Okay, so just review the scores. Gary Ettner wins the day at 94 miles per hour. Pretty impressive. Again, this is Wind Score, which is the U.S. sort of proprietary DOS-based scoring program. Let me do Soaring Spot, Uvalde 2024. Let's see if that searches it out. Soaring Spot. There we go. All right, here we go. So, super easy. We go into the days, click, and then here we can see this beautiful depiction of the task. And you can actually, I believe, play the task. So you can see what it looked like and felt like. The airspace, the airports that you'll fly by. You can do this in the morning before the flight. Get a nice visual representation of what you're going to see. It's very easy to do the planning. There you go. And so there's the task. Then we can go into the daily. You can see the penalties in more detail about the penalty, I believe. Nope. This was kind of done secondarily. It was very nice of the scorer to do this, to score in both scoring programs, but unfortunately completely unnecessary. This is the world standard scoring, and we should have used this from the beginning. It's exactly the same thing. It's proprietary, or it's not proprietary. It's commercial off-the-shelf software, and a much more powerful tool. And all the information that we need is here. You can also suck tasks into your flight computers from this. There's all sorts of capability, and it drives directly to all the websites. It's searchable. It's not behind a firewall. All that great stuff. Yeah, so this is Soaring Spot, and I'll make sure I touch on it every day as well as we roll through the rest of this contest. Okay, well that is it. The top 10: Gary Ettner, Rick Ingerbrough, 151 and 151 kph. I was 150.26, just behind those two. Sergey was 148, just a little slower, and I managed to go around the task, looks like about a minute and a half faster. David Leonard, 259, at 148. Thomas Greenhill, who's the junior pilot, actually had a killer day. Went around in 304 at 143 for 915 points, and actually beat his dad, David Greenhill, who had a little bit, another scoring penalty. So there's another 100-point penalty for starting. So there's two guys who had their contest kind of destroyed by another change in rules, and but David came back. He was nearly winning the contest in the middle of the event. So good on him. So niner is David Greenhill, and that's an AS 3318. Beautiful glider. Dave Springford from Canada in his Ventus 3T. Knocked it around pretty fast. Bob Fletcher, ASG 29. Fernando Silva, who we saw a little bit of. Robin Clark. And then 11th, Sean Murphy, Andy Blackburn, Peter Dean, Biff Huss, Tim Taylor, Jersey with his penalty, Luke, who was flying in a 15-meter glider in an 18-meter contest, God bless him, Glenn Kelly, Dave Greenhill, who we talked about, Dave Coggins, Nelson Hall, Jim Franz, Roy Burgo, who I think had some issue today, Dave Nadler, who we saw a little bit of, and Dave Caffey, who looks like he laid it out. Those are the results. Thanks for watching. We'll get to day 2 soon, and thank you for your support.